All right. Wow. We got a rowdy crowd today. Woo-hoo. Well, welcome everyone. How's everyone feeling this afternoon? Good. All right. That's what we like. This is the first art discovery of our 2024 season. So we're very happy to have so many people here. We might need to get more tables and chairs next time. It's a growing trend. We love it. So thank you for being here, and thank you to those of you who are joining us online. It's a beautiful, semi-sunny day here in Scottsdale. We know it's not like that everywhere else in the country, so being with us virtually is great. So today's panel is going to be very fun, very lively, and Curt and I were just talking. It's interesting that not only are these our amazing men who can share the story of the West, all three of these artists are both sculptors and painters, which is, and some of you are even a quadruple threat. You're on that.
Well, that's one of the things that's so amazing is to be able to tell the stories, because certain mediums are good for this story and maybe not that story. And so being able to use all of that medium is going to be able to present stories to a broader audience, and in a way that is going to be more compelling, it grabs your attention more because the medium suits the story better. So it's really great to be up there with these guys. And let's face it, anybody who can throw off a hat like Randy, we want to know.
Yeah, Randy strikes you when you first meet him as kind of a quiet guy, but no. So with that, let me go ahead and do the introductions. My name is Susan. Along with my husband Jake and I, we organize and put this whole show on with a lot of help from a lot of amazing people, including my brother Doug and our amazing team in the cafe that help keep your whistles wet while we do this. So to your left is the world famous Randy Galloway. Maybe we'll learn about your hat in a little bit too. And then right next to him between us is Joe Wayne. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe's first year, and I went up to him on the first day and said, I'm going to have you talk on our first Friday. And he's like,
thanks a lot.
Yeah. He's like, no. And I said, yes. And then he used to be shy and quiet, but right next to me is the wonderful Curt Mattson. So as always, we're going to learn some things that you won't learn just walking around, although it's a pretty deep dive when you walk around and get to talk to the artists while they work. But I always like to kind of start with each artist saying a little like who they are, where they're from, and kind of how long they've been in the art world. So we'll start with you, Randy.
Okay. I started out when I was in Mexico, everybody said, you're going to die. You don't want to try to be an artist. Many artists in our family, so nobody really knew how to deal with me. So I ended up being an art director for 40 years and then started doing anything when I was around 55 and started painting, and then I started doing sculpture. It was my birthday present to myself on their 65th birthday to try that, because I was always do it ever since college. But when I was in college, there was weird things going on, like trying to go on and some with that stuff, and I did the traditional bronze. So it was a great opportunity here to do that, and I had just a blast doing that. So that's been great. And hopefully I can keep doing it for a long time future. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Randy.
I think I got started as a kid. My parents would put me in art classes after school, but where I really committed was when I started working in the foundries, and I worked in the foundries for maybe 15 years, and I learned it from the bottom up and learned how to do pretty much everything involved with it, down to the patinas. And I'm still learning. There's still a lot to know, especially with patinas. You can take a piece and give it a different patina. You can set the same piece next to each other, two different castings with two different patinas, and they'll have a completely different feel. And so always just trying to find what fits best for the piece.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe. All right, Mr. Mattson.
Well, some of you guys already know I grew up in the horse business, so I worked ranches from California to Alberta. I had no idea what it was to be an artist. I didn't have a stinking clue. So all I wanted to do was ride cokes, and that's what I did. I trained for the public for a lot of years, and I ended up in a ranch up in Northern California. And back in '79, I'd gone to the what was then called Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. When you walk in, you see the end of the trail. It's 18 feet tall, and it's like, oh, good. You see that? Remarkable. And when you go into their permanent collection, there's a ink drawing by a guy named Edward Vereen. Now, Vereen did watercolors, etchings. He got well known for those. They were fantastic, but they were California. It was rough trail. That's my background. And these are words that spade bed horses, when they got their radiators out and little eagle caps. And it was like, really great. So I started there, but I quit the outfit I was on so I could learn. And I was 27, and I tell everybody, in horse training, when you're training horses, most horse trainers end up broken and broke. But I figured in the art business, I might be broke, but I won't be busted up so I can stay horseback. Get to tell the stories of the West that are true, that are genuine, because most people have not had that experience. And when take as a man, put us a horseback in the West and experience that, that's what I want. That's all I got. If it ain't cowboy, I got a whole bunch of nothing. But that is what our heritage is. And so that's what gets you fired up, and that's what you want to share with everybody else.
Yay. And aren't we lucky to have all of you share your stories? And I don't usually do this, but I do want to say we have somebody with us today that probably knows as much about Western art and has seen more art than almost anybody I know. And I might drag him up here later, but Seth Hopkins, the executive director of the Booth Western Art Museum in Cartersville, Georgia. Anybody been there? Yes. It's a fantastic museum, and it's the largest Western art collection museum in the country. Don't tell anyone in Texas. They like to claim it, but I've been there. It's a magnificent museum, and Seth is a wealth of knowledge and a wonderful human being. So, like I said, we might pull Seth in a little bit later, but it's fun to hear from these guys. And the topic today really is the way of the West. And the reason these men were selected is because they really are telling that Western story. And I was speaking again, kind of, telling Joe, you're going to talk, and he's not a talker. Curt didn't used to be a talker either, so we've got plenty of to work with here. But
my booth is right across from Curt, so I'm learning.
Yes. Put them together. But many people don't get to come and discover the beauty of the West. A lot of people never come west of the Mississippi, and through your stories and your beautiful landscapes, you're telling that. So I'm going to have you go ahead and talk about why the paintings that you've done, this is a beautiful canyon piece, what they mean to you and why you want to share those with people.
Well, I don't have a plan as far as depicting the West. I think it's just the life that I'm living and the places that I've been and the people that I know. And for example, this painting, I was on a hiking trip outside of Escalante, Utah. And this is called Coyote Canyon, where we were hiking. And I remember my friend walking ahead of me, and he was coming around the corner where these horse and riders are in the painting. And I thought, this has probably been an ancient trail for 1,000 years. And I thought, what if you had a couple of first thing is it never turns off. The brain's always cooking. So I'm hiking and I'm thinking, geez, look at this. This could be a painting. What if you had a couple of horse and riders just going around the corner? It tells the story, and it also gives you a real sense of space and gives you a sense of, how big everything actually is. And so I guess a lot of my paintings, my sculpture just comes from uh, experiences that I have and the places that I live and visit. And um, I guess,
Yeah, and I always like to invite people to see the world through the eyes of an artist because most of us tend to rush through life. Would you agree with that? And when we take a moment to slow down or we look through the eyes of an artist, we get to see things that we might never see
and that's the great thing about being an artist is that we take the time. We're the ones that take the time to appreciate and actually see things. And people, I don't know how many times I've heard this. I'll be painting something and somebody will say, "Oh my God, I would have never thought of that as a painting." Sometimes they need to see it as a painting to realize how beautiful a place is.
True. So, Randy, you are a great storyteller, both through your work and through your stories, verbal. So, tell us why it's so important to you to share the stories.
First of all, these guys, something to do with that. So, I have a choice for this. I'm not really mind looking at, and my work is non-American all the time. So I thought I'd do this and some different things I can always switch. But
Place.
this was in Nike, and he was up out of Denver, and he was great grandfather of the famous Chief Knife Chief back in the 1800s, and he does reenactments and still goes on a tradition and makes a bunch of traditional native outfits, and he makes these hats. So he beat a display man. I found this little in the front, and I remember to him, and I said, "Oh, Martin, can you do one of your cool hats for me with this?" So he came up with this. It's just unbelievable, unbelievable, and these were the ones that
Native Americans were famous for wearing when they signed treaties, because they would take these top hats were really popular back then, and all the politicians, all the government people, all wore these top hats. They were made out of beaver pelts, and that was the first thing that happened around the U.S. where the beavers were almost wiped out before the buffalo were almost wiped out. It was a huge industry in Europe for women's handbags, women's shoes, men's top hats, and they couldn't get enough of that because they would say these beaver pelts came from the New World, America, and so it was huge, and they would just have trade with the Native Americans, and the guys were always coming out from the places, the manufacturing companies in Chicago and New York, and they were just producing millions of them and sending them over to Europe with all the fanciful stories of what happened with the Native Americans. But
I'm glad they didn't get rid of all the beavers, because then we wouldn't have anything to cut down trees.
Yeah, I know. Luckily, some beavers hid away. They knew how to hide and kept producing, so that's good. But I grew up in New Mexico, and I was always around the Native Americans there. Growing up, I used to run track. A lot of the Native kids ran track, and so I got to know them. They were still busking from the reservations back then. Didn't speak hardly any English, but it was a real impact on me. I used to carve Kachina dolls and build teepees and everything to do with Native Americans. I loved it. And then once you start traveling around, the West really encompasses probably 15 states. And everybody always thinks of the West as just like 2 or 3 states. But, you know, back in the old days, anything across the Mississippi was all the West. And it's just fantastic. The more you travel around, the more you see, the more there is to love about the West. The animals, the landscapes, the incredible stories, and most of my artwork, I feature characters. So that's what drew me in, was all the unique characters from the Old West. So I like the timing around the early to mid 1800s. And there was a lot going on in the U.S. then. It's really interesting. And there was a lot of people like some of these guys here. This guy I call the Intrepid Explorer. And what he did was they had a lot of men from all over the world would hear about America, the new world, and they were entrepreneurs and they were adventurers and had big egos, so they wanted to come to America and make a name for themselves. So they would wear these outlandish outfits so that everybody noticed them. So it's kind of like wearing the hat. But that's my main thing. Is I really, I bounce around and I do a lot of stuff with the wildlife and the landscapes, but my main emphasis is on trying to capture some of those fanciful characters and romanticize the whole thing. Just like Hollywood has done, and I'm part of it. I'm romanticizing the West.
Love it. That's great. We'll hear more about that too. And you are, if you ever want to learn anything about horses or bits or ropes, you're going to learn that from Curt Mattson through his stories and through his work. So,
yeah, that's one of the things that's fewer and fewer in terms of Western art. There are fewer and fewer people who have been out there and that know this stuff from the inside out. And one of the things that I tell everybody, great art and authenticity are not mutually exclusive. And ultimately, you're telling, whether it's contemporary Buckaroo, or whether it's going back into the West, telling people the truth is really important. And so you do your homework. And my grandfather was a saddle maker. I learned to build saddles. We've been in this culture my whole life. And when you talk about a cowboy piece of art, you should be able to tell where a cowboy's from by his gear. You should be able to, as well, with the era that cowboy's in. And if you know, you know. But if you don't, the only reason I get to do this is because somebody's good enough to buy a piece, and I owe it to them that it's not only the best artistic piece that I can do, but that it's a genuine article. So when you look at a piece, you should be able to tell this guy's from this particular period or from this region. A cowpuncher here in Arizona is way different than a buckaroo like where I grew up. And it varies even amongst that. If you ever look at the Charlie Russell paintings, go back and look at those, and what you'll find is you're going to see Texas cowboys. These cowpunchers come all the way to Texas, right next to a buckaroo or a buckaroo from California. The reason for that is in 1886 there was a big cattle die-off. Those ranges, because of a bad winter, those ranges were restocked with cattle from California, Nevada, from Oregon, and from Texas. So you're going to see a guy, and here again, I only have a little bias. You want silver bits, center fire saddles. You want fancy carpet, all the good stuff. That's buckaroo stuff. Now, when you see the other guys, they're kind of plain. So you want the fancy guy. But you'll see these guys working side by side in a Russell painting. And that's because of what happened historically at that time. And all of those things reverberate right down to today. So when you go to northern Nevada right now, this gal here is dressed like a typical buckaroo. And you can see those are called armitas that she has on. That's a Santa Barbara spade. The little posada is called a bosalita, right here. There's a hair rope. It's get-down rope. You don't lead a spade-bit horse by the reins. You lead him by the get-down rope, and it's because of the nature of the bit. And so she's got a 60-foot rayada. Everybody here in Arizona ropes for 30-foot nylons. That's a 60-foot rawhide rope, and it goes back to roping longhorn cows. There's a rodeo up in Jordan Valley, Oregon, and it's a horse roping, but you have to have 20-foot loops. And so you head and forefoot these colts and lay them down. It's all hardcore buckaroo stuff. So all of these stories, you tell them genuinely, you tell them exactly what happened, because the truth is so much more interesting than anything that's made up. And so you want to articulate all of that through the art that you do.
How do you do all your research?
Part of it, if it's contemporary like her, this gal, she ships cows up out of Central California. So we go to ranch ropings, and we go to all kinds of different ranches stuff and get the first-hand stuff. I know lots of buckaroos, lots of guys that are out there on the outfits. This other guy, that's Mark Henry. He is cow boss up at the Spanish Ranch up in northern Nevada. So these are real cowboys, real cowgirls who are doing the real thing. And so you go out and you find out, if you don't know it personally, then I'll go to museums, I'll go to different places where they have the genuine articles. When I do a piece, I do a series, love to do pieces on the mission era. Well, I go and find where the missions are, look at the gear that they have. I have books that go back and articulate everything exactly. I read journals, so I'm reading first-hand accounts. I don't want to read somebody's interpretation. I want to read what they went through, because we can attach our modern sensibilities and rewrite history. That's not what the calling is. The calling is to tell people the truth in context so they get a feel for exactly what these people went through. And those people, what they went through was so profound. And when you think about our lives compared to what the challenges they had, it makes you appreciate everything that we have. And it makes you appreciate them and the toughness that they had, the ingenuity that they had, and the conviction that they had. So all of those things come into play. And you want to make sure you get your research right, and you do a lot of reading and a lot of homework to make sure that that is correct.
See, that's for sure that it was tough, and none of us would have been able to make it back then to get through, except for Curt. Curt would have been the guy that survived everything. Yeah.
We would have all been hanging out with Curt. Yeah, I mean, if our cell phone dies, we're like, what? How do I get there? Yeah, I don't think I would have been a good prairie person, pioneer, but I would have hung out with Curt, though. Yeah. So, I want to talk a little bit about, you can continue with your stories and why you want to share them, but why, I think you kind of touched on in the beginning, why do you like to use both painting and bronze or sculpture to interpret your stories? I'll just have you start with Randy and work on down the line.
Same kind of thing that Curt was talking about, that I'll look at something in the beginning as a painting, and then after a while, I start thinking, wow, that'd be cool, 3D, so it moves around. And one piece I have is a buffalo dancer. So they used to do a great ceremony and have a dozen guys that performed in the buffalo dance the night before they went out and had the buffalo chase and got their buffalo meat for the next 6 months. So it was a huge celebration. And when I had a guy that was posing for me, he was dancing around a campfire, and it would have been a beautiful painting, but his motion was so incredible. I thought, wow, to have that and be able to turn it around and see his outfit on the back and see all the muscles and the way he moves. So that was a decision to do that one there. Someday I may still do painting with the fire, but at least I got that done, got that out of my system the way I saw it there. But, a lot of times you've got the choice, and it might be timing. You might think, well, I got to get this thing for the show. It's going to be quicker to do the painting, so I'll do the painting. So there's all those things come into play, but I really like the things that are better 3D, that you go ahead and do those sculpting. And I've got the one little boy on my wall there. It's called Grinning About Winning. And it was a friend of mine up in Wickenburg, and he was the auctioneer for the shows that I would do up in Prescott. And his grandson came to visit and was in one of the beginning rodeos as a little kid, and he posted this photo of him on the fence. And I saw that, and I called him, and I said, hey, can I use this to do a painting or something? This is such a fantastic shot. The way he had his hands, his big giant grin, and his huge hat that he had on. And he called his daughter, and she said it'd be fine, so I ended up doing that. And I've got him, so it hangs on the wall, so it's 3D coming out, and it really makes that piece come alive with that little boy hanging there on the fence.
What a great name, too. I love it. And you also have the beautiful Hopi Maiden, this, suspended almost.
Yeah, she's cantilevered up on the ladder, sitting on the top of the adobe building. So instead of having this great big blocky building there to make the whole sculpture seem heavy, I thought, well, I'll just have the roof top, and have her sitting up there like she'd be on the top of the roof, but just attached to the ladder, and then have the ladder and take advantage of the bronze being so strong that it would hold the bottom of that ladder and all that weight of her sitting up there, and have it cantilevered. So it makes a really unique piece and creates cool shadows. And so I get a lot of a lot of attention on that one. And actually just sold one an hour ago.
Okay. We love when art finds a new home. Yeah, very good. Thank you. So, Joe, how about you? Like, how do you decide, should I do this in a bronze or painting? And this is this fabulous buffalo. Curt and I decided we would frame it for you. He's called Bison.
Well, I think some things are, well, painting itself is hard to do, to try and make something that's flat look like it's got form and volume. But to take something that does have form and volume and try and make it interesting from every angle, that's a real challenge. I guess I pick things because I can't really afford to buy art myself, so if I want it, I have to make it.
I think I would like to have a hunting dog.
Yes.
You have your hunting
yes,
dog.
Yes, I have a hunting dog, and I do a lot of bird hunting in Montana. Some of my happiest times are driving the back roads and getting out with the dogs. And yeah, the bird dog is kind of almost become a memorial to her because she recently died, and she was such a good dog. But that piece shows her pointing, and there's this moment right before the pheasants bust out. And you could kind of see the pheasants looking back at each other thinking, oh, geez, do we do this? Because every time we do, somebody gets shot. So for me, it's a memory of this dog, and it will last forever.
That's great. You definitely have to take a look at, after we finish, we'll tell you where their studios are. You have to go see these in person. So, and you did pretty much cover that, but you also do many pieces that using the negative space to tell the story.
Yeah. That's one of the things, when you talk about sculpture, there's 4 things that make great sculpture. Once you get past anatomical concerns, okay? You gotta get your, one thing with cowboy art, you have to learn human anatomy, you have to learn equine anatomy, you have to learn bovine anatomy. And of course, if you do wildlife, then the same thing. But here's the deal, it's mass texture-like design. Mass texture-like design. If you have those components, and remember that a horse is a mass on 4 sticks, okay? A horse on flat base is not exciting and it's not sculptural. So what you have to look at when you talk about negative space, that is the space around the piece. Positive space is the space that is the piece. So I use a lot of brush to pull this up so you start to connect things. And if you will look, as you study really great sculpture historically, you'll see those components, your surfaces. How does the light move around the piece? Is it interesting? That's one of the things. Look at Joe's piece. See how this thing just sparkles? He's put nice surfaces on this piece so it grabs your eye, and you have animation to take you around it. There's primary, secondary, tertiary areas. You direct the person around the piece so it's a constant adventure. So you want to have that mass, you want to have the texture so it sparkles. You can see they just sparkle. And it takes you around it. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have so many wrinkles or so much detail that your eye goes to that instead of the big picture. You want to direct them around. Think about how you see. Focal point and then everything else blurs. You do the same thing here. So those 4 components, when you see it in a piece, it will draw you in and it'll always be interesting. With Randy and they were talking about that piece with the ladder, that negative space idea is wonderful. It's important to do those things. So you look at those components and then make sure that you're taking the viewer on an adventure. So every time they see that piece in their home, they go, oh man, it's fresh and it's new because they're always discovering something in the piece. And that's because you've done a good job. You put all those components into it.
It's like a good poem. You can come back to it, find something new.
I always like to tell people to go around and talk to your art on a regular basis. Look at it. Sometimes we tend to just put things up and then we move on. And we love kind of playing with art. We purchased a new painting in September and waited for it to come because just you know, those of you who have to have artwork shipped, you know, it sometimes takes a while. It had to dry and get to us, and then it was in a big crate, and then I was like, I thought I knew where I was going to put it, but it was not going to fit where I thought I would put it. So then I'm like, okay. So it was this big production to redo lots of things, and this painting had a significant amount of negative space, and we happened to have a great bronze of Scott Rogers' Pony Express. So I was like, oh, we're going to have to move the bronze over here so he'll cast a shadow. So, I mean, you really can play with your art and have fun with it. It should really enhance your life, and putting sculpture and paintings together really does create that story in your own home environment. And we kind of love mixing and matching art, but it's fun to do that storytelling.
As a painter and sculptor, we've always got a rotating show. If we're having something dry to get ready to go to the gallery, it's in the house. We move things around just like you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy.
Yeah. Interacting with your art. Randy, do you have a favorite story? I know you go to the South Dakota, or any story of painting you've done or experience you've had when researching to do paintings.
Well, I end up with hundreds of stories when I go out for photo shoots because it's such a blast. And then you start talking to your models and digging into their brain about what they're wearing and what they're going to do as a reenactment and putting it all together. And then you come home and you read about it and you make more into it, And there's always all kinds of things happening. One of the good ones that I remember was this one Native American guy, really big, giant guy, and he had a horse that he could stand up on its back legs and hold it there for a long time, and he was a huge guy. And so the artists are all gathered around, clicking a couple of pictures of it, and then he's back down, and when you go to that, there's a million things going on. And you hear about it from somebody else, like, hey, Randy, did you see the guy on the horse over there? So you run over there, and people are saying, do it again, do it again, do it again. And this poor guy was going up, and the horse gave out, and it toppled over backwards and landed right on him. And you could just hear the bones break and the wind go out of him, and they ended up, we were 20 miles out from the nearest little town along the Cheyenne River. And so they just got everybody out of the way and sent somebody running till they could get a cell phone. And then they found the coverage, and they called, and they had a helicopter come and pick him up. And so once they got him to the hospital and put him back together, he was okay. So that's a good thing. But that kind of stuff just happens out of the blue when you're there. And the very first time I went, when I was a newbie, we had one big hill where they were, some cowboys were trailing a bunch of giant longhorns down this hill through the brush and the trees, and just beautiful images coming down through there. But you wanted to get them as they're in motion and they're moving around. And those longhorns can be small, huge. Some of them have got like 8-foot wide horn span. And there was a big ditch that ran down through there from the rain coming down. And so I'm there with a bunch of the other artists, and I go, oh man, look at that ravine there. That'd be cool to get a worm's eye view of these. So I jump out there and I dive into this ravine, and I'm thinking, this is going to be just like in Hollywood, I'm down level and they're going to run right over me. It's going to be awesome. And being, stupid, everybody, all the other artists are going, you're going to die, what are you doing here? And so the longhorns come, and they're just like tromping, you can feel the whole ground shake and everything, and the cowboys are riding like, look at that stupid artist, And they're trying to get the longhorns to move out of the way so they don't come near me, So I had everybody all shook up because I was so stupid there. But luckily they didn't cave in on me, because they said, they came up afterwards and they said, these guys weigh just 1,000 pounds. If they would have stepped on the edge of that ravine, they would crumble. They'd come in right on top of me. I'd be dead. They'd be hauling me away. you know. So that kind of stuff just happened all the time.
Kind of like the Yellowstone videos of the people don't pet the fluffy cows. There's some fun.
I once thought about doing a sculpture of somebody feeding a bison a piece of watermelon and being gored, and titling it "Buffalo Don't Like Watermelon." There was somebody that was trying to do that in Yellowstone Park. I live 50 miles north of the north entrance of Yellowstone, and I kept threatening to do that. I haven't done it yet.
There was one of those videos of in South Dakota, and the bison took her pants right off, and the people videotaping it, they're watching it, and the man goes, "She doesn't have any pants on." And the lady goes, "She's not wearing any pants." He goes, "Nope, not anymore." And they were on the buffalo's horns. She was fine later on though, and they retrieved her keys. Yeah. So let's not do one of those. All right, I'm going to go back to you. Tell me some other good story about how you got in. Okay, you told us about seeing the museum in Oklahoma City. Up to that point, you've been a cowboy. And what happened that made you decide you could be an artist, and how did that journey work for you?
Well, you know, I had no idea. This is how bright I am, so, you know, it's like a little slow. I had no idea that I thought all cowboy artists were dead. Because I saw it in a museum, right? I had no idea. And so I'm thinking, well, you know, that's kind of cool, but they're all dead. So I went in, when I was running the ranch up in Northern California, I had to go to town. So I go to town, and, you know, I don't get to town. And so I went into this store, and here's a magazine, one of Southwest Art's old magazines. It had a Grand Speed bronze on it called Outlaws and Twisters. I still got the cover, I still have it. And I saw it and thought, oh, good grief. There's people doing this and they're alive. And so I started to mess with it there at the ranch. And I'll tell you, this is how good I am. Just so you talk about just, you know, so I got some paint, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I decided I was going to put together this piece. So I did 2 pieces there at the ranch. And we stood 2 studs. And so what that means is people breed their mares in to be bred to these horses. And so as they come to the ranch to look at the studs, you know, we get to talking, and I'd say, oh, I have this, you know, I'm kind of doing some art stuff here, you know, like the Russell thing. I'm kind of a cowboy artist guy. And so I take them in, and I showed them this horrific clay. And I had 2 of them there, and they were so bad that you just can't even believe it. Well, somebody bought one. And so then I'm thinking, boy, howdy, I'm really good, because somebody bought one of my pieces. So we ended up taking it to Portland and got it cast. And then they bought it. It was sad. Here, it's a sad tale. Well, I know several years ago, somebody had that casting, and they were running around down in Old Town Scottsdale trying to sell it. They thought it was going to be worth a fortune. And I'll tell you, when I came off that ranch, one of the guys that taught me, a guy named Mel Lawson, I had known him from the horse business. He had a world champion reiner called Coronacoti. And he's the one that showed me how to do the basics, build an armature and all of this stuff. But here's how good I was. This is all the talent. It's good grief. It's so good. I went down there, and I showed him this clay, and he said, well, that's nice. Let's start over. And we tore it up. And so you started right from the ground up and start to learn again. And you would end up, I would come back so depressed. It was like, oh, I couldn't even look at the thing after we critiqued something, you know, I'd take something down. That went on for 4 years. And so it was a building process from there, because I didn't know anything. I was just going to ride horses my whole life. So it was a whole different ballgame, but that's how it kind of started, and then it all develops from there.
That's commitment.
Well, and you know, I'll tell you, the Lord brought the right guys. I was taught by the best. You know, Mel, Grant Speed, Herb Bennett, Pat Happenstall. These guys took me under their wing, and they spent hours and hours with me, and I'm slower at Christmas, so it takes me a long time. Not everybody gets that opportunity, and you see the Lord just directing your path and putting you right where you need, so you become excellent. And ultimately, it's not about perfection, it's about excellence. And finding the voice that you've been given, and then sharing them with everybody else. I have 3 goals with my art: glorify God, educate, and enrich people's lives. So if I do those 3 things, that's my criteria.
Enrich people's lives, that kind of dropped out. I just wanted to say.
Yeah, enrich, glorify God, educate because people love to learn, and enrich people's lives. It's got to be something that picks you up. Art should intrinsically lift us up. So we see plenty of stuff that tears us down. We want to see stuff that's we're going to look at it and it's going to make us feel stronger. It's going to make us feel better. It's going to give us a sense of touch of who we are as people. And those stories, that's why story, we're talking about all the stories are going on. Story is so critical. We are story beings. There's a reason Jesus told parables. It's because people related to them. And stories are what people relate to. So it's really important to put all of those pieces together.
And it really makes you appreciate your collection even that much more. And if you don't, we're not all going to collect every piece of art we see. It's still great to get the story behind it and carry it with you and share it with friends. And that's really the connection that keeps people coming back. And so very fun. Have you ever done, any of you, like a painting and sculpture that were meant to be together? Like a package?
I did a triptych one time for the American Patriot Building. They're the #2 supplier of MREs to the military. And the center one was 6 feet by 9 feet, and each side piece was 4 by 6 feet. And when I had the large one in my studio, it looked like a movie screen. It's just a blank screen. I was looking at this thinking, you can't mess this up, and there's a lot of square inches on here to do that. But it worked out, and there's been a lot of deals been done underneath of that. It's in their conference room.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about that. That large scale of canvas, how do you scale up?
What do you mean?
Like, okay, you were working earlier today on a study, this
Yeah.
little magnificent piece from Teton. So what if you wanted to take that little study and scale it up to a...
It's all relative. It's, however it fits within the frame of reference, it's going to be the same if it's large. And so I had all kinds of railings and windows and stairs, and I mostly a landscape painter, but there was very little landscape work in the piece, so I had to try and enjoy, here, how am I going to say this? I would wait for the alpine glow, because you still can have that on a building, and there are some trees in the piece, but it's not, a piece like that isn't as enjoyable for me as doing a landscape, because it's kind of organic, a landscape piece. But something with buildings, it's almost mathematical. You've got these straight lines, and you've got to make sure everything lines up, and it's a lot of math in a way.
I always say artists are problem solvers, and math always does come into the equation, whether you know it or not, right? When scaling. Right?
Well, I had one, getting back to the idea of both a painting and a sculpture that go together. I had a great photograph that I took back in South Dakota of Chief David Bald Eagle sitting on a log in front of a stretched out buffalo hide, and he was playing the drum. And his wife was sitting out of the picture off to the side, and I said, he said, "What do you want me to play?" And I said, "Well, just be singing, and I can get you in motion, and I'll take a million pictures and pick the best one." And he says, "But what do you want me to sing?" And his wife blurts out, "She'll be coming around the mountain." So here he is, a native guy, you expect a drum beat, and he starts singing, "She'll be coming around the mountain." And so I had always wanted to do that as a really large painting. I thought, oh, this is such a gorgeous. He had his headdress on, full regalia, all beaded, just fantastic. And he was a really famous guy. And then when I was starting my sculpture, this was the second one that I had ever done. I started to do Chief David Bald Eagle sitting on that log, and I thought, well, I need to get a little story going on here, so I put a raccoon in the back, sneaking up behind the log, and he's reaching over, stealing his medicine pouch, and I call it stealing the show, because while he's singing and playing, he didn't realize the raccoon had snuck up behind him. Because in a lot of the Native American lore, they have the raccoon as the prankster. So it was perfect to have a little prankster with his hands. And then 4 years went by, and I was feeling so bad about not having that painting that I did a small one of him sitting in front of that buffalo robe to get me primed for doing a larger one of it. And so it sold right away. So one of these days I'll get around to doing the full-scale one, but I did do both the painting and the sculpture of it.
And very memorable there. Yeah. I'd love to ask the audience if you have questions, because we kind of get carried away up here. But Seth, if you'd be willing to come on over here and share some of your wisdom, I'll give you my seat, and I'll stand next to Curt. So Seth Hopkins, come on in, join us. It'd be interesting to hear your story of how you came to be the executive director of the Booth Museum and how you studied diligently for that.
Curt, I didn't appreciate that you didn't break that chair before I got here. That was a wild Mustang chair.
It's a bucking chair. You gotta watch those things.
You're supposed to tame those before you get here. But anybody really believe what they said, that this guy was shy at any point in his life?
No.
He used to hide behind his sculpture stand and not talk.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. So I was working for a telecommunications company in Cartersville, Georgia in 1999, and my Y2K moment was when the boss man walked in the door and said, I'm selling this company you've been working for 10 years. We're going to build a Western art museum and you're going to run it. And when I regained consciousness, I said, I don't know anything about art and I can't spell museum. And he said, well, it's going to take 2-3 years to build the building we have in mind. Get out there and learn about it. Go learn about it. And so I started traveling the country and coming to places like this, and galleries down in Old Town, and coming to the CA show at the Phoenix Art Museum, and visiting studios, guys like this, and asking lots and lots of dumb questions. And 3 years later, when we opened the building, I knew the answer to all the dumb questions. And it's been a heck of a ride ever since.
One thing I know is that you had a list, there's a to-do list of, he would travel and study museums and experience museums, so you had a to-do list and then you had a to-don't list. And that's one of the things that makes the booth so special, is that it eliminates a lot of the to-don'ts.
Well, this is involving the design of the building itself and the structure of it, and even the structure of the staff and the programming at the museum. Between the architectural team, the design team, and the museum staff, we probably visited 200 facilities over the 3 years we were building the building. And we were looking at structure and planning and flow and the visitor experience and programming and all those things. And like you said, we really built the museum against the don't do this list, because we didn't find that many that we really loved. And you know, we would go to the staff of the museum and say, what's wrong with your building? And give us a list of about 20 things, and say, what's right with your building? And give us a list of about 3. So the don't list was much longer, and we built it against that list. And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite work of art?
That's like asking which is my favorite child. Although someday that's an easy question. I don't say it's necessarily my favorite, but I do have a painting in the museum. It's done by James Reynolds. Just a beautiful landscape with one cowboy at sunset. And, you know, as a scholar, they tell me I shouldn't like it. It's too cliche, it's too sweet, it's too saccharine. It's too romantic, but by God, it's so damn well painted and it's so beautiful. I just wish it was over my mantle at the end of the day. I could sit and toast a glass of beer or wine with a guy and say, hey, it was a good day. We rode for the brand. We did a good day's work. We deserve a little congratulations here at the end of the day and have a beer with that painting. That's kind of my thought.
A painting that you connect with, that's great.
Well, should I tell them the pink fuzzy slippers test?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't talk about oxidizing.
Well, oxidizing, that's another topic for another day. But do you know about the pink fuzzy slippers test? No. Okay, so here you are Sunday morning, padding through your house in your pink fuzzy slippers. You got a cup of coffee in one hand, you got the New York Times crossword puzzle in the other hand, and out of the corner of your eye, you spy a work of art that you get to live with, and that you think you own, but you really don't. You're just the custodian of it for this generation. But you see that work of art out of the corner of your eye, and you get this slow, silly grin that creeps over your face, because you get to live with it. And it pays you dividends every day that you own that piece of art. Now, think about your stock certificates and your 401k. What kind of dividend are they paying every day? It's depressing. So the pink fuzzy slippers test, a work of art that you get that slow, silly grin and you get that dividend from, that's the only reason to buy a piece of art, because it meets the pink fuzzy slippers test.
Amen. Yes. Absolutely. I love it. Thank you. So let's, are there questions from each of you or all of you for anyone on the panel, including Seth? This is unusual to not have a question. Okay.
This is for Randy. You were talking about when you were doing this, or going to do the sculpture of the person dancing in front of the fire. I was wondering how you were able to capture that sculpture when the person was dancing in front of the fire. How did you just take pictures, or?
Well, yeah, I had the one picture of him, so then you only get the front of him when he's dancing. So that was, but it was a perfect thing to get me started on doing sculpture, because then I had to research the anatomy. So I would Google man's arm, man's muscles in the arm, and I'd get hundreds of pictures, and then finally there'd be one that was turning around all the way around so I could see, and then I'd do man's leg and then stomach. I remember when I was sculpting it, people would come by and go, ooh, nice abs. And I'm like, and so, I was learning as I was doing it, and then to imagine what was on the back. I went through just probably thousands of photos, Native American old black and white photos, trying to find somebody with a buffalo outfit on from the back, where I could see what happens, with that headdress and where it goes. So I kind of pieced together what would be cool on that, that they used a lot of the buffalo tails to fly off of them, because when they danced, those buffalo tails would fly around, and it added to the motion of it. And I thought, well, that's what I need, is to add to the motion of this guy dancing in the sculpture. So I had those buffalo tails flying off of the back and flying off of his legs and stuff. So it was all just research after that, and people don't see that, how long it took me. I had money involved in getting to South Dakota, and then money to pay the models, and time invested, and then I come home and I start something, and so then I have a million hours on the computer researching something, and then I finally get the artwork done. So there's a lot of time put into these things.
Susan, I thought it was interesting earlier you were asking these guys about deciding, to do a subject in painting or sculpture. I think it's fairly unique in Western art that you have so many artists who both paint and sculpt. And I think that goes back to Remington and Russell, who both painted and sculpted. Both were similarly equal, in talent in both of those mediums. And I'm amazed how many Western artists there are that do both and are really good at both. It's just not fair, damn it, is it?
and Joe Beeler is another one that.
Oh, yeah, lots and lots of examples. But, yeah.
And I know that you've been inspired. That's one question I didn't ask each of you: is who's your biggest inspiration?
You know, I'll tell you, Edward Maureen and Solon Borglum, Mayors of Diomedes, was the greatest piece of work of Calvin. I just love that thing. All the things that make great sculpture are in the Mayors of Diomedes. And so those would be the two that for me.
I would say I'm a big fan of Bill Anton's work, and as a child, I wasn't like the kids that had Batman as a hero. Charlie Russell was mine from an early age.
Man, there's just way too many that everything inspires me, you know, and I just can't get enough of it. I've got stacks and stacks of magazines and photos and things I've saved, and you know, John Coleman has just been a huge inspiration to me, and a lot of the guys in the Cowboy Artists of America. Don Crowley, I really loved his work when I was first starting out as a painter because I liked the detail and the realism, and so he was one of the ones that was doing that, and I got to go down to his studio and meet him down in Tucson and talk to him, you know, so that was a big influence there with painting. And there's just, you know, every week there's somebody else, and I like this whole group of new artists that's coming up, and Logan Maxwell Hajiz and those guys that are doing all that stuff out in California, and it really appeals to me because of my graphic design background, and I'm thinking, why was I so stupid? Why didn't I do that? You know, I could have done that before they did, and it's just an ongoing thing. And that's the greatest thing about being an artist is I'll be doing it till the day I croak and still wanting more, you know, want to see more, want to do more.
I like Bob Ross. He makes it look so easy. But mine would be Howard Turpin, and I've had a chance to be in his studio, and that's an incredibly magical experience. And you know, good Lord willing, he's going to be with us a few more years, but he's going to be one of those great heroes.
Yeah, I drove over to LA when he had his retrospective show, and when I saw that was coming there, and it wasn't a traveling show, you know, I thought it was going to come to the Phoenix Art Museum or something. They said, no, this is over at the Autry, and it's a one-shot deal, and they've been working on it for a couple of years, and it cost millions and millions to ship all his stuff over there, because some of the pieces went back to the 70s, and they would find the owners, and they would ship it all over there for his retrospective, and it was unbelievably fantastic. I spent all day there. They had to kick me out. I was hiding, and they were trying to get me out of there. I stayed way past the closing, and then I got them to give me a stamp, and I called my wife, and I said, I'm staying another day. So I stayed overnight, and I came back the next day, and I went there for a million hours, and just wasn't enough. He's the greatest painter. It's fabulous.
With all due humility, the retrospective that we did for him was better. And it's still out there. You can go on our website, go to virtual experiences, go to the past temporary exhibitions. You can walk around in that Howard Turpin exhibit on our website.
At the booth. And by the way, we did in our art connection, which we have issues up there if you haven't picked them up. We did cover in our museums to visit feature the booth, of course. So, Ned, do you have a question?
You would be is it on?
Yeah.
You would be disappointed, Susan, if
If
I broke my streak and didn't ask a question. Curt and I have had this conversation several times, and it relates to the fact that I look at the demographics in this room, and we talk about where do we find the next generation of people who are as enthusiastic about Western art as we in this room are. It's challenging. Everybody, kids today, they're into technology, they're into automobiles, they're into these other things, and they don't seem to pay attention as much as we would like them to do, I think, in not only the lore of the American West, but the paintings that bring it to life. How do we educate or bring around the next generations of people who will be enthusiastic as we are about what you do?
And by the way, Ned has been very involved in the Museum of the West here in Scottsdale. So,
Yeah.
Good questions. Anyone? Curt?
Good. You know, that's a really good question, Ed, and we've talked about it a bit, as you said. But here's what happens, and it's going to be one person at a time, telling them what it's really like. I'll give you a perfect example. I was going to a show up in Estes Park, Colorado, and I'm on the plane, and like Wendy wasn't with me. And when Wendy's not with me, it's not a pretty picture. So I go to the back of the plane, I sit on the right-hand side, left-handed, and I can sit and read, and I just read my books, okay? So I sit down, and everyone's getting on the plane. Well, fine, a couple sits down next to me, and they're in their 30s. And so, you know, usually I'm not too chatty. I just sort of, because I don't know. Anyway. No, it's true. And so I'm sitting there with my book, you know, and stuff. So we start talking. And they're going to Estes Park too. Oh, yeah, what are you going to do? They're going to a family reunion. Oh, really? What are you going to do at the family reunion? Well, we're going to go hiking. We had a chance to go horseback riding, but, you know, and I said, go horseback riding. Take the trail ride and go. I told them about what the horses are like. I told them about just exactly how smart they are, how they communicate, exactly what takes place when you're on a horse, because there ain't nothing better than being horseback. So I said, bye, and off I go. You know, and so I get up there to Estes Park. Well, I'm at this show, and here they come. And they said, we went on the horseback ride. That was the best thing. I am so glad. And they were fired up about cowboys, horses, and the West. Now, they live down here, and she works at Mayo Clinic, and he's an investment guy. But the crux of it is, they're never going to see the West differently. And what we have to do is tell them the truth, because they're being lied to. They're being told that if you're a rancher, you're destroying the environment. Sorry, not true. They're being told that the ranchers, you know, they don't care about those animals. Not true. They're being told all of these things, and when you know what the truth is, it's so much better. So we have to communicate that to them, and the art is a way of telling. That's why I so focus on. You tell them the truth, because it's so impactful, and when they hear that, you'll start to see a change. They understand the reality of the culture, and the culture is what we want to expose them to.
Amen. Preach it, brother. So, just a real quick follow-up. You won't. They'll be here when they're this age that you all are, and when they're ready, they'll come. And, you know, there are things we can do, and we certainly do that at the museum every day. Youth programming, young adult programming, all those things. But until their kids are out of school and they're traveling and have some jingle in their pocket that they don't have to spend, they're not going to come to art generally. I mean, it's just, history says that's not the way. And, you know, how many of y'all were in it when you were in your 20s and 30s? And this crowd may be slanted a little more than others, but, you know, it'll happen. We worry about it, but...
I agree, it will happen.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe. I wonder if you can share with everybody your story about how you got Sweetie to pose for your bronze that you did.
Well, she's a pointer. She's a pointing dog, and she was a young dog, and I had my sculpture stand set up, and I've got a turkey roaster that I put my clay in, and I can get it to the perfect temperature, and you want to be able to reach in and grab a hunk of clay but not burn your hand. And so I've got my room set up, and I had a little table about this high, and I didn't give her much room to work on it. And I set her up on the table so that she's eye level so that I could look at her while I was sculpting. And then I had a fishing pole with a feather on the end of it. And she was such a natural at such a young age. I would go like this with the fishing pole and the feather, and she'd point. And she'd sit there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and she'd get to the point where she started to shake. And I'd let her down and give her a break, and then I'd put her back up, and we would do it again.
That's a great story. That's a good dog.
She was a good girl.
So, one more question, and then I'm going to point to you all in the right direction to find their studios.
This is a bit lighter, and I could answer the one about education at a very young age, the art programs that there are in schools now. And in terms of Western that too could be, included. In fact, we have a daughter who is a teacher, and she's teaching her kindergarten class about wild animals and about moose. And she built a full-size moose out of paper to show them what it was about. And of course, she asked her father, who is a great hunter, fisher, and all the rest. Anyways, I have a lighter question. I have watched Curt for many years, and Randy, with the hats. How many hats have you had over the years? And that alone would be a conversation piece to start anybody on a conversation about West and Buckaroos.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. Cowboys hats are real important. This called a Nevada snap brim, and that's what I've worn most of my life. I used to wear, if you think about Quigley Down Under, because Tom Selleck and I, we went to different schools together, so we're like brothers. We got the same beauty and everything. So I used to wear one of those hats for years. I had that hat, and then Wendy really liked these, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go with it because it's just for. In those days, if you go back, there's a book that's published. It was published 3 years ago. It's by Jay Dessart. It's called North American Cowboy: A Portrait. If you can find one, get it, because what Jay did is he broke it down by regions. And you'll notice in the Buckaroos, that's what we wore in those days, unless you were up around the alcohol, and then you'd see more flat hats. But so I had that style, and then this, and then you just wear them until they just, fall apart. But if you look at an Arizona Cowboy, there is Melrose Man stuff, right? And so you see, that's the kind of hat they wear. Texas, it's taco hats, predominantly taco hats. When you see all these different hat styles, it's influenced by the different cultures. California's, what I love about my background is that it is very stylish. And so the old Buckaroos were very proud of their horses and their horsemanship. That's why there's silver on everything. That's why the saddles are carved, because they want to have the best, and they were proud. They made next to nothing, but they were proud of what they did. So the hat styles tell you regions about a cowboy and about where he's from. In fact, if you go to the Padlock Ranch, which is in the middle of Wyoming, half that ranch is Buckaroo, half of that ranch is Cowpuncher. So you'll see the distinctions right there.
So the question was, how many hats do you have?
I have 1, 2, 3. 3. That's
Okay.
Oh, I've got tons of hats because I kind of smash my head into a lot of stuff, and I ruin my hats. So I'm always walking into a tree branch and tearing up the hats, so I got to have another one. So I've got a stack of hats.
I have a pile of them as well.
You guys are hat addicts. Okay, so that's a good segue into me telling you where their studios are. All 3 of these gentlemen are on the north side, and Joe and Curt are right across from each other in
120.
The 120 pod, and you are at 142 on that side. So now that you've heard some of the stories of some of their pieces, it'll be fun to go kind of take a closer look. And what was the dog's name?
Well, her name, she was such a sweet dog, I couldn't think of a name, and I kept calling her Sweetie, and before you know it, that was her name.
So Sweetie,
yeah.
And Hopi Girl, and you've got a ton over there too. So just thank you so much for being here at our first thing, and thank you, Seth, for jumping on in. Go see the Booth Museum in Cartersville, and we'll see you next weekend.
Go put some red dots on those pieces that'll make you happy when you learn your pink fuzzy slippers.
Yes. The pink